Hey, good morning, everybody. Nikki Burnett here, Taste Life Nutrition on Taste Life Radio, KUHS Denver, streaming live. And we're super grateful to have Henry here with us, doing his job back in the back. And so today it's just you and me. Today we just get to talk a little bit about a pretty controversial topic. It's one that's a little bit near and dear to my heart, but you know, it's one of those that a lot of people have a lot of differing opinions on, and it's all based in science. Some of it's old, some of it's new. So that's the stuff we want to talk about. But first, gratitude. Actually, no, first, what is this show about? So if this is your first time tuning in, I'm a functional nutritionist. Taste Life Nutrition is my company. It's my little practice. And, you know, the goal of this show is to have a lot of fun, but talk about truth. We want to talk about the science of nutrition. We want to talk about the science of health. We want to talk about what it is to be well and what it is to be your own advocate and what it is to find truth in the science. And, you know, all of this is to empower you to dig into who you are, what you need for you, because you're unique. I can't talk. You're unique, you're different than everybody else. The same thing is not good for you, that's good for other people, and vice versa. So we really want to just empower you to take action, be your own advocate, find the information. The things that I say here is all as truthful as I know it to be, to the best of my ability, based in the science and based in facts, which we know changes on a daily basis, right? It changes all the time. And that's what science is about. So I give you the science that I know to be the best science today. I also want to give you what can be both sides of a story when the time is right. So we're going to dig into that, but right now, gratitude. And I think that what I'm really grateful for today is the beauty that this country gives to us in the landscape, right? So what I mean by that is we went to Utah, you know, went to Zion, you know, National Park, and it was beautiful and it was amazing, and just the country, all of the amazing mountains and cliffs, and I just can't even. If you've not been to Utah, you have to go and just drive through it. So, you know, from here in Denver, it was a 9.5 hour drive. So we literally did not turn the radio on. We talked, we took pictures, we looked at the scenery because it is fascinating. One of the things we did though on the way is we went to a place called Canyon of the Ancients Guest Ranch. This is the coolest spot, and if you need a place to go, since we're sort of, you know, here in our world and we're not doing a lot of traveling outside of the country, you know, this is an amazing place. The owners are Gary and Ming Adams, and it's phenomenal. It's beautiful. So you have guest homes, and you have all of the animals, you know, longhorns and sheep and chickens, and everything's grass-fed and, you know, well cared for. And it's, I don't remember, several thousand acres. It's gorgeous. So if you want to go somewhere to get away, and, you know, it's going to be warmer there, you know, southwest Colorado, go and check it out. And I brought this because I wanted to show you. So this is a book. It's Spirits of the Stone. We had to get it because it is all of the ancient writings of these ancient people. It's fascinating. And so this is a book that was written by Gary and Ming, and a lot of these ancient, you know, drawings are on their property. They found a whole city on their property that nobody had seen before. So go check it out. It's really amazing. So that's what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for good people, for the beauty of this country, and, you know, we've got our faults, but the landscape is amazing. Oh, got my earrings there too. These are amazing. So these were made by a Navajo, and you know, the jewelry is beautiful. I could just spend all the time there. So anyway, check it out. That's what I'm grateful for. So what we want to talk about today is, I think, as I said, is near and dear to my heart. So I want to give a little bit of a history. We're going to talk about cholesterol, if you didn't already know that. And there are so many different viewpoints and opinions and research on cholesterol. what is good cholesterol? Is cholesterol good? What's bad cholesterol? What is HDL? What is LDL? What does all that mean? Should someone be on statins if they have higher cholesterol? Should they not be on statins? So I want to dig into that, but a little bit of history on why this is near and dear to my heart. So you know a little bit about me. I've been vegetarian. I've been vegan. I think I was vegetarian for about 5 years. I was vegan for about a year. The reason I went vegan, this was before I went to nutrition school. The reason I went vegan was because my dad read this book. Okay. He read this book by Caldwell Esselstyn called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And so I wanted to know what it was like to be a true vegan and if it was a good thing for me. I was experimenting, right? And I still do that. Experiment on myself constantly. So when I decided to go to nutrition school, you know, it was a 2-year program, and the entire time when I first started, you know, it was within the first, I don't know, few months of nutrition school that I realized that because of the data, this is all based on data, that being vegan is not a lifestyle. It might be therapeutic, and I say it is therapeutic. It can be a therapeutic diet, but it's not a lifestyle, okay? And so with that said, what I knew was at the end of my coursework that my thesis was going to be based on this book, because I wanted to prove or disprove what the book was about, which is the way he prevents heart disease. And so just a little background, it's been a while since I read the book, but essentially no fat. That's your first problem right there. But no fat. He does use statins, and it was a handful of his patients. I think it was 12 patients that he wrote this book on, so not a large study. He had some good success, right? But you know, there are no nuts and no seeds and no avocados and no real food, and he used statins. And there were people that they were excessively chronic. Like the doctor said, go home, you know, I need, you know, put your things in order because there's nothing else that we can do. And he did bring them back, right? But he's also saying that this should be a lifestyle, which is that's the main part that I don't agree with, and we'll dig into that. So with that said, my thesis was written on this book, and the other thing I want to make sure of is that my goal in this conversation is that you know that I am not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice, but it's a hope that maybe you learn some things. If you don't, great, and you take it and you run with it and do what you feel you need to do with it, right? So you take the information, you do your own research. That's why I brought in some books that you can use as resources, and you know, and dig into it for yourself. Find the practitioners who you trust, who are going to give you the best advice based on what you know. So take what I say, do your own research. You have to be, I have to be, we all have to be our own advocate. We have to learn as much as we can, or find someone who's trusted who can help guide us in those situations. You know, cholesterol, as I said, it's, you know, we all know what it is, but what it does, how it reacts in the body, what we need it for, those are all the things that can be, you know, fairly controversial. So, all right, let's move into, you know, what cholesterol is. And so most of the cholesterol that we form in our body is literally formed by the body. We get very little cholesterol from the diet. So when somebody tells you don't eat eggs because it's high in cholesterol, it's not going to affect your cholesterol, not your serum cholesterol, right? So the liver makes most of your cholesterol. There are other cells that make some cholesterol as well. So most of your cholesterol is made by the body. Very small amount may affect serum cholesterol, but like almost none, okay? So eggs are fine. Eggs are good for you unless you have sensitivities to them, right? This is not a blanket statement for everybody, but eggs are good for some. They are not going to affect your cholesterol, but they are not good for people who have allergies to eggs or sensitivities to eggs. So know your body, right? Okay, So a couple of things that I think we want to talk about that I think is really important in starting this conversation is understanding LDL and HDL, because what we hear in mainstream medicine, mainstream media, we hear it everywhere, and I'm so tired of hearing this. It makes me crazy. But what we hear is LDL cholesterol is bad, HDL cholesterol is good. Now, for one, HDL is not a cholesterol. LDL is not a cholesterol. HDL and LDL are carriers of cholesterol. That's all they are. They're carriers of cholesterol. So LDL carries cholesterol to the tissue. So cholesterol is utilized by brain tissue for cellular integrity, for making steroid hormones, brain health, all kinds of stuff, right? So having cholesterol brought to the tissues is very important. We have to have cholesterol coming in to our tissues, okay? What HDL does is it carries cholesterol away from the tissues. So cholesterol can become oxidized, which is a problem, so we want it removed, and so then the HDL takes it in order to be recycled or to be eliminated, right? So we have to have both of those. And so the reason they say we need more HDL, which is, probably accurate, or it is accurate, is because HDL carries away that oxidized cholesterol. That's important, okay? But understanding how important it is to have both of those. Now, what's also just as important is when we have say we have a comprehensive metabolic panel run, which gives us a full lipid panel, or if it's just a full lipid panel, doesn't matter. Usually what it looks like, or what it looks at, is going to be LDL, HDL, total cholesterol, triglycerides, and maybe VLDL, right? VLDL being very low density lipoprotein. So all of those things are important, but it doesn't give us the entire story. Far from it, okay? So what's important when we're looking at cholesterol is looking at what we call the particle size. So the particle size of cholesterol is not something that's typically run on a comprehensive metabolic panel. Some practitioners run it. Mostly when I see it run is, and this is only my little practice, what my little world, what I see, but most of the time it's run, I think the cardiologists run it, but it's mostly run in functional medicine. And I run it when I have somebody who is concerned about, their cardiovascular risk factors, they have family history of cardiovascular disease, then we want to look at the particle sizes to truly understand what the cholesterol is that's going on in their body, okay? So when I say that, what we're looking at, let's see, I have a note here. I want to make sure I'm giving you all of the information that I want to give you. So when we're looking at particle sizes, what we want to see, and it shows in the numbers, is we have HDL that's supposed to have, we call it large buoyant particles, okay? Same with LDL. We want them to be large buoyant particles. So what can happen though, due to excess sugar, due to unhealthy fats and oils, say canola oil, the American Heart Association recommends canola oil, saying it's heart healthy. I'm going to tell you, don't have to believe me, do the research yourself. Canola oil is incredibly and excessively inflammatory. You must stay away from canola oil. I cannot express that enough. Very important to stay away from canola oil. And then all other vegetable oils. You got your oils, you got your cottonseed oil, your vegetable oils, your corn oil, all of those are incredibly toxic. So just don't do it, right? And we'll get into the foods here in a little bit. But I think it's important to note, and I have heard it on, Pandora, the commercials on Pandora, as recently as, 6 months ago or something, talking about, the commercials saying canola oil is heart healthy. Oh, it's awful stuff. Okay. So what can happen due to these nasty oils and sugar, they all create inflammation. Inflammation takes those particles and it oxidizes them. So those particles can end up being small and dense. So they're small, dense particles, they're oxidized, that creates an atherogenic type of cholesterol, okay? So looking at those numbers, understanding the inflammatory markers, really important to understand inflammatory markers. There are multiple inflammatory markers because if you have inflammation, then then it can create atherogenic cholesterol particles. Okay, so know your particle sizes. Don't just look at this. The lipid panel is good, but it's not the whole story. And that's what we want, and that's what we do. It's what I do in functional nutrition. It's what functional medicine does. And you know, more and more people are, you know, practitioners are moving into really trying to understand what's the underlying cause. But that's what functional medicine, functional nutrition is based in. It's the underlying cause. Why do you have the oxidized, small, dense particles? What's the inflammation coming from? Could it be infection? Could it be, you know, a number of things? You know, so often I see infection, but is it the foods you're eating? You know, like I said, the fats and the sugars create lots and lots of inflammation. Okay, so let's see. A couple of things I want to make sure that we talk about is how important it is. Cholesterol is. It's important for hormone production, digestion, the manufacture of vitamin D. And then your cell membrane. So those are the things that we kind of covered. I just want to make sure that that I'm hitting all points here. Okay, let's see. Moving on. So I think we already hit all of that. We did hit all of that. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about the role of how cholesterol isn't necessarily indicative of cardiovascular disease. One thing that I think is really important in making a point is half the people who present in the emergency department have normal cholesterol levels. Half, okay? And that's fact. So that should bring questions up just in and of itself, okay? Let's see, one of the things here, so going back to the eggs, when we're talking about how eggs are not an issue, it's been, you know, decades that we've vilified eggs and vilified fat. I mean, decades, right? And it's a huge problem. And I think, and even though, you know, so, you know, kind of going back in history a little bit, you know, I think it was the 50s where, and if you want to really understand the history of fat, here's another resource for you. It's the Big Fat Surprise. Nina Teichholz, she was part of, when I did my research on my thesis, the Big Fat Surprise. I'm going to show it to you again, because I'm going to put it up. That's a good one, and gives you a lot of history on how fat was politicized, why we had the low-fat craze, and just for your information, as we had the low-fat craze, people went low-fat thinking it was going to help their cardiovascular disease or prevent cardiovascular disease. It actually was on the rise. So more and more people are dealing with cardiovascular events, which is, you know, includes stroke, and dying from them, right? I mean, it's the low fat craze, low cholesterol craze is not helping people. Okay, so let's see. My notes here are too small, so this is a problem for me. I need to be able to see. So I think one of the other things that I want to make sure that we hit too is when we talk about saturated fat. Saturated fat is, again, along with all fats, has been terribly, terribly vilified. And if we dig into that just a little bit, we can have saturated fat that's inflammatory. So if we think about, if you go back and listen to any of the shows that I've done, or Facebook Lives, or any of that stuff on meat, so we can have meat that is 100% grass-fed, that is healthy. I'm not going to go into all the details because you can find the information on any of my other shows, but healthy grass-fed meat has saturated fat in it, but it's a healthy fat because the animal has a nice healthy balance of their omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-3 being a precursor to anti-inflammatory parts of the immune system, essentially. Omega-6 being the precursor to the pro-inflammatory part of the immune system. Both needed, both necessary, and we need that balance. And so if we take an animal off of grass and put it onto grain and the foods that are not natural to this animal, it's not what they're supposed to eat. it creates obesity. It also creates more marbling. So that marbling that's going through the muscle that we always talk about is amazing and makes it great food, which is true. Fat is yummy. But this is not a healthy fat, and it's not a healthy saturated fat because there's an imbalance of the omega-3 you've got in omega-6. You've got too much omega-6 creating too much inflammation, and so that inflammation literally transfers to us. We get more omega-6, which creates more inflammation. So we have to be aware that, like coconut oil. Coconut oil is high in saturated fat, but it's not. It doesn't mean it's unhealthy. I think for most people, it's very healthy. Genetically, though, some of us may not be able to handle as much saturated fat. So we have to take into consideration genetics, which is why we're unique. We need to know who we are in order to know what's best for us. And so, saturated fat being vilified is it's a problem because it's not a bad thing. One of the most interesting things, and this is what I got out of this book. This book right here is the book. If you take any book to read, this is the book to read. It's easy. Dr. Stephen Sinatra, he's a cardiologist. He's a medical doctor. This book, the Great Cholesterol Myth, is an amazing book. You can see all of my notes here and here. I could read it over and over again. It's just so informative. Gives you so much information. But the studies show, and remember, we always want to get a clear picture or a complete picture. But studies show that saturated fat raises LDL. So everybody freaks out, oh, we can't raise our LDL. But what it actually does is it raises the large buoyant LDLs. It doesn't raise the small, dense, oxidized LDLs. So it's protective. Raising the LDL that's large and buoyant is protective. So when we only hear that saturated fat's bad for us, and it increases our LDL, everybody gets afraid. But you always, you hear me say it all the time, and the people I bring in always ask why. Always ask why, and dig, because not everything is black and white. There's always some gray. There's always more to the story, okay? So check that out. Okay, so a couple of points that I want to make here that are data points that I think are really important in sort of continuing to make the point when it comes to the need for cholesterol is adults over the age of 60 with higher LDL levels generally live longer. So I'm going to say that again, because I want you to hear it. Adults over the age of 60 with higher LDL levels generally live longer, okay? Another point being total cholesterol levels are generally not predictive of the risk of heart disease and may be absent or inverse in many studies, okay? This is another good one. Few adults who experience familial hypercholesterolemia die prematurely, okay? So what we need to understand is we genetically may have high cholesterol levels. Doesn't mean it's bad. You still need to know your particle size. You need to understand your health fully and completely. But just because you have high cholesterol in your family and you have high cholesterol now doesn't mean it's bad. Dig in and look. Another thing that I want to make a really big point of is, yes, you may genetically be more susceptible to heart disease, but there's a very small percentage of genetics that actually plays a role. This is more epigenetics. So we've talked about epigenetics before. We have our genome, so it's our eye color, skin color, those things that don't typically change. Then we have our epigenome, which are locations on top of genes, essentially, right, that have the ability to turn on and off due to lifestyle. Lifestyle is key because that's what makes a difference in all that we do, in our health and in our wellness and in everything. Lifestyle is key. So you may be predisposed genetically or epigenetically. You may have what's called SNPs. SNPs is short for single nucleotide polymorphism. You can kind of think of it as a mutation, although it's not truly accurate, but it's helpful to kind of understand it that way. But you may have SNPs that increase your risk for cardiovascular disease, but what's going to take that risk down is diet, lifestyle, exercise, not too much, not too little, stress reduction, keeping toxins off of your skin and out of your environment. All of those things are key to decreasing and sort of overriding that epigenetic potential. And that's all that it is. It's epigenetic potential. You have the potential, whatever it might be. It might be autoimmune disease. It might be the inability to absorb vitamin D, which I see all the time. All of those things, okay? So you have this epigenetic potential that you have the ability, for the most part, to override due to your lifestyle. This is amazing, really, because what it does is it gives you so much control. It empowers you to take care, it empowers you to learn who you are, but it also puts the accountability on you. You know, you can't blame it on your genetics. You can't blame it on, bad luck or old age or whatever it is. It's up to you to do the things that you need to do to mitigate some of the steps that you might have, right? Okay, quick break. So I can make sure that I'm hitting everything that I'm supposed to. So first I want to talk about I'm losing my words, the challenge. So the picture that we have up here, and I'm going to tell you, I forgot to update this. We actually moved the date back to October 5th. It's our first one, so just it's a kind of a challenge getting through some of these new things. But this week I put up our link to the challenge. So it's you might recognize some of the people in this photo. This is Dr. Lynn and Dr. Sam McDonald. They have a show on tomorrow, and I'll be on their show with them tomorrow, and we'll be talking again about this program that we're doing. So we're doing the 5-day challenge that leads up to this really amazing program that has a lot to do with the stuff that we're talking about today. But the 5-day challenge itself is just a free sort of a look into what it is that really digging in deep into who you are, right? This isn't something that is a general overall for everybody. It helps you look at you so you can understand what it is that you need. And so starting October 5th, not September 21st, sorry about that, but starting October 5th is when we're going to start this challenge. So you can go to this link, this bit.ly link, and register for that. And we're going to have Facebook Lives and questions and answers and all of the fun stuff. So we'd love to have you as a part of that. The three of us are doing this together, and so we've had an amazing time doing it. It's been a huge learning process for sure, but it's been a lot of fun. So go to that. We'd love to see you take part in that. Also want to talk about Rightful. So Rightful is a supplement company that I love and I appreciate. They are a pain management supplement. It's turmeric and some CBD and some ashwagandha and some different things to help support pain. It helps to support sleep. It helps to support focus. It's a really great product. It's a liquid product based in coconut milk. It tastes good, and it's a morning and an evening, and it really is, it's one of those things that is so well received and works so well that it's being sold in pain management clinics. Which is awesome. I mean, this is where we start to cross over, thankfully, allopathic medicine with, more functional, functional foods is really what this is, and it works beautifully. So you can go to rightful.com, and put in the code TLN20, like Taste Life Nutrition, TLN20, and you can get a discount on your first order. So check them out. Okay, let's move on, and I want to talk a little bit about statins. And so this is kind of a hard one because what drugs have a place. I am fully on board with drugs having a place in our society. They can save lives. They are really important in a lot of situations, but I do believe that they're overused. And I also believe that there are situations when money plays too big a part in this. And so one of the quotes that I have here is, it's an interesting one, but it's like, again, this is from a review, so this is not me. Evidence supporting the use of cholesterol lowering statin drugs to lower your risk of heart disease is slim to none. And is likely more more than the manufactured work of statin makers. At least that's the implied conclusion of a scientific review published in the Expert Review of Clinical Pharmacology in 2018. Okay, I'm going to finish reading this. I think it's important. The 2018 review identified significant flaws in 3 recent studies published by statin advocates. Okay, who are statin advocates? Usually the statin companies, right? Attempting to validate the current dogma. The paper presents substantial evidence that total cholesterol and low-density lipoprotein LDL cholesterol levels are not an indication of heart disease risk, and that statin treatment is of doubtful benefit as a form of primary prevention for this reason. Now that's a really important point right there, is the primary prevention. So, primary prevention meaning you have not had a cardiovascular event, you have been diagnosed with high cholesterol, right, whatever that means to whomever. I didn't get to tell you when I was like 20, I don't know, 23, 24, 25, my cholesterol was a little bit elevated, and they recommended statins to me. I was floored. Of course, I didn't do it. Anyway, it still kind of just makes me just crazy angry to even think about that. But primary prevention is when you have not had a cardiovascular event. Okay, so part of one of the reasons too that I decided to do this show today on cholesterol was I had a friend come to me who is a younger guy, and he's been on statins now for 4 years, and he his levels are increasing, and he's trying to figure out why, and they want to raise his dosing. So, you know, we had this discussion, kind of like what I'm doing, you know, with you right now. I had the discussion about what cholesterol is, why we do it. But the thing that we need to make sure that you're understanding as I go through this, and as I told him, is you listen to the information and you make your choices, right? I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to give you the information backed by science, okay? And so in moving forward with that, what I've read, and it's in this book, and my understanding is probably in this one too. This is another one by Stephen Sinatra, Reverse Heart Disease Now. Okay, I love Stephen Sinatra. I think he's absolutely amazing at what he does. You can follow him. I have no ties to him at all, except I just think he's super cool. But when statins, and what he says when he uses statins, is when somebody has already had a cardiovascular event. Okay, that's when it's necessary. The interesting thing about statins is, they can create lots of problems, and we'll get into some of those things. They will create lots of problems, but it is anti-inflammatory. So statins bring down the cholesterol, but they're also anti-inflammatory. So when you have somebody who has had a cardiovascular event, there's obvious inflammation which needs to be addressed. And so, and I also believe that if the rules and the laws that have to be followed when someone's had a cardiovascular event, and it is written that, I'm pretty sure that this is correct. I'm no longer in the hospital. I've been in pharma. I sold pharmaceuticals, but I'm pretty sure that there is a standard of care where if you've had a cardiovascular event, you have to prescribe statins. I think you have to do it. If you don't, I think there's potential for a lawsuit. I believe that's right. But I think that's a time when maybe statins are important, is after a cardiovascular event. What I don't know if it's necessary long term. I think they do it long term, and maybe it is. And that's just something that I don't know. So again, going and understanding for yourself and for your own needs and what your body requires, and going to people who you trust to give you the right and the solid information. Okay, so let's talk about the dangers of statins. At this point, this is crazy. It's showing, drugs.com show that there are 35 million people on statins, and they often experience side effects. It's just what they do. I'll tell you, my dad's on a statin. He had a stent placed, and of course they put him on a statin. Again, I think that's standard of care. But severe fatigue. severe fatigue is what he's experienced, and so you know, he's working through that, but it's hard, and that is what happens. And so some doctors, before being put on statin, will want to do a baseline liver panel, which I think is important, because what statins do is they're stopping, you know, the liver, we talked about this, the liver produces cholesterol, and so statins are going to affect the production of cholesterol in the liver. And so, you know, they can create liver damage. And so your liver enzymes may go up. If liver enzymes go up, it's cellular death, right? There are hepatic cells that are dying. So, you know, that's not really something you want. You want your liver fully intact as best as you can. It's pretty important for detoxification and so forth. So, other things that people can experience: headaches, muscle pain, lower back pain, side pain, congestion, stuffiness, runny nose, sleep difficulty, constipation, hoarseness. And this is an interesting one. Let's see. There's a an April 2018 study found lowering cholesterol levels in men could bring about changes in nerve cell membranes and behavior. That's a big deal. So a couple of things that statins do. So, and this is an important one. So there is a pathway called the mevalonate pathway, and so it interrupts this pathway. And what this pathway does is it's so here, reading my notes, diverse class of over 30,000 biochemicals, or I'm sorry, biomolecules. And so in looking at this, it's the production of our steroid hormones. So if you're on a statin, this is why it was so alarming when a young man is put on a statin drug. It interrupts steroid hormone production. These are your sex hormones, right? So what can happen? Your libido can start to shrivel up. Sorry, make myself laugh. Anyway, and so, you know, and it's also an antioxidant. So cholesterol is 25% of cholesterol is in your brain. So it's an antioxidant. It fights infection. So, and you know, it's mostly, so it does, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about HDL too, because I really want to dig in a little bit to HDL by itself. But it also, so it's gonna, you know, it's gonna block cholesterol that goes to your brain. It's necessary for transmission of neurotransmitters, and it blocks the production of CoQ10. CoQ10 is the most important antioxidant for your heart. So CoQ10 supports the mitochondria. The mitochondria are our cells that produce ATP, which is energy. So the energy that we need for you know, our biochemical processes, all of them. And so you have more mitochondria in muscles and in organs that are used more regularly, right? So the heart is the organ that is pumping constantly. It is used all the time. So it has the most amount of mitochondria per cell. And if we don't get CoQ10 to these mitochondria, then they're not able to make the energy that they need to make. CoQ10, this is why if you're on a statin and you're not taking CoQ10, it's a huge problem. You must take it. Talk to your doctor, that's totally fine, you should, but understand if you're taking a statin, CoQ10 is an absolute must. You need a good quality. I've got my dad, I think, on 300 milligrams of CoQ10 right now, but it is an absolute must, okay? So let's see, what else? So this is kind of going back to what I said a few minutes ago. Because of this pathway, statins are anti-inflammatory and decrease blood viscosity. This is key too. Studies have shown no benefit of statins in women. In this book, it says statins make women stupid, which just kind of makes me crack up a little bit. But it's true, because the way that it affects us, you know, we're different than men. We just are. And the way that statins affect women is different than the way that it affects men. And we don't do well with statins. Women don't do well with statins. So please get this book. Do your research. Learn about this stuff. It's important stuff. Okay. I'm thinking, so I want to touch on this a little bit. I have a bunch of notes here, but I want to make sure that I'm not running out of time, because I could talk about this stuff forever. but you know, statins are problem, or it can be a big problem with people for people with diabetes. And you know, it's one of those things where you've got, you know, a diabetic who has probably, you know, multiple risk factors right there. Their risk for cardiovascular disease and events goes up because of diabetes. Statins aren't going to necessarily be the way to go. And so I want to just read a couple of things to you to make sure that we hit on the right things. Sorry, I'm reading my notes here. Okay, the trend for prescribing statin drugs is concerning and is particularly relevant to diabetics whose underlying disease increases their risk of heart disease. So putting a diabetic on statins can increases, so there are general symptoms that it can increase. So it can be sensitivity to sensory stimuli, urinary tract infections, dizziness, things like that. So it can be a lot of GI issues, the metabolic issues, so abnormal liver function tests, hyperglycemia, hepatitis, anorexia, so forth. Musculoskeletal, so joint pain, swelling, myalgia, elevated creatine, phosphokinase, you know, things like that. So cardiovascular, death in up to 10% of patients contributes to heart disease. Okay, so statins not necessarily the way to go for diabetics. This is a lifestyle condition, okay? So and this is type 2. This is adult onset, which is now also child onset. But again, I'm telling you the information. Look it up for yourself, okay? All right, so one of the things here that I think is, and we kind of hit this already, but it's, you know, it's this overprescription of statins. Statins have their place. Absolutely have their place. But you know, what we need to understand is before we go and put somebody on a statin as primary prevention, somebody just with high cholesterol and no cardiovascular event, it's lifestyle modification, it's diet, it's understanding the good healthy fats to eat, limiting or eliminating sugar and carbohydrates, you know, your breads and your pastas and things like that. And that's why we have people like me, people who are in functional medicine, who understand that lifestyle plays a huge role in this process, okay? Okay, so we talked a little bit about saturated fat. I think we sort of jumped the gun on that a little bit, which is totally fine. I think we had its place, but understanding that saturated fat is not the demon here in this at all. And so what this research is showing is deficiencies of and excesses of certain micronutrients like folate, vitamin E, zinc, which may result in an ineffective or excessive inflammatory response. So if we're nutrient deficient, that can be a huge problem for us. So almost every client that I see is deficient in vitamin D, and vitamin D plays a huge role in everything that we do. It is considered a hormone at this point because it's so important in all of the things that we do. So know your D levels. I always check D levels before I supplement with D. If you have, for normal people, you know what I mean, but without autoimmune conditions, you want to look at being right around 70 or 80. And that would be your number. And so when you look at your number, and if it's below 70, below 60, you need to supplement. You need to understand, is it genetics that's creating this problem, right? Are you not able to hold on to your vitamin D because of your genetics? If you have an autoimmune condition, then you need to be right around 100. So you need that vitamin D support. And that's another point that I want to make. I don't know if it's later in my notes here, but it doesn't matter. So we're talking about HDL and the importance of HDL. HDL plays a huge role in the immune system. So if HDL is too low, then it's not doing its job of removing excess oxidized cholesterol. If it's too high, like over 80, so know this, because this is not a situation where the higher the better. And I've seen my clients come in who are sitting at 80 or 100, and everybody's like, yay, your HDL is amazing, when what actually is happening is there's a problem. It's an immune response. It's too much. So you're sitting over 80 what I start to think is autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease. What's happening? What's going on here? Why is HDL playing such a big role here? There's a problem. Okay, so that's a really, really important point to understand when you get your lipid panel done. This is why, a basic lipid panel without particle sizes is helpful. I can start to look at, okay, I'm seeing HDL at 100, then I need to start looking at other places. What's happening? What's going on here? Okay, that's that detective work and understanding the underlying processes and conditions that the body might be dealing with. So making sure that you are eating the good healthy foods, lots of vegetables. No matter who you are, no matter your genotype, lots of vegetables is very, very important. Making sure that you're getting the supplements that you need. Testing, this is why we test, so we know how your body's functioning, why it's functioning as it is, okay? Let's see, so this is interesting. The title here is High Cholesterol Could Lead to a Longer Life. Go figure. It's not what we're told, right? So, a couple other things I want to read to you. According to a Japanese study published in the Annals of Nutrition and Metabolism, older people with high LDL cholesterol generally live just as long as and maybe outlive people with low LDL. Very important, okay? So another important point to this is while the reasoning behind it, they're still trying to understand the reasoning behind it. There are some factors that could be at play, which is cholesterol may protect against infections and atherosclerosis, as the many observations that conflict with the LDL receptor hypothesis may be explained by the idea that high serum cholesterol and high LDL is protective against infection and atherosclerosis. So, all of that to say that LDL also is protective. So if there's an infection going on, you need to have LDL and HDL to help to protect and to be an antioxidant and help against infection. And so levels lower than 160 have increased likelihood of infection and dying from infection. Okay. The body is very precise at regulating cholesterol. It knows what it's doing. So how much do we really want to interfere with that? Okay, as long as we are watching our lifestyle decisions. LDL has the ability to inactivate more than 90% of harmful bacteria in the body. Huge. That's huge. Let's see. Cholesterol may protect against cancer. Let's see. Okay, so low cholesterol below 180, and this is total cholesterol, and violence in psychiatric patients have been linked. There's also an association between low cholesterol and suicide dating back more than a decade. Okay, so we're looking at cholesterol affecting our brain because there's so much cholesterol that the brain needs and utilizes. Okay, I think most of this we have been through. So yeah, I guess additionally, which is a really important point, another thing that's on the rise, Alzheimer's disease. What a scary condition, right? It's a really scary disease. Lots and lots of factors play into the development of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. It's not going to be just one thing. There are many factors. But understanding Alzheimer's disease can be reversed. So know this. If you're dealing with it, if you have a family member or friend dealing with Alzheimer's, know that there is the ability for it to be reversed. Okay, this is fairly new, but it's happening. So find somebody who can help you. Okay, and so let's see. A number of studies have demonstrated that the importance of higher cholesterol for the prevention of Alzheimer's. Sorry, I'm not reading this very well, but higher cholesterol can help to prevent and safeguard the brain, right? Protecting from Alzheimer's disease. I think I want to skip over this. I'm really afraid I'm going to run out of time here. But I think, this section here, we're talking about iron and iron overload. A lot of people, when we talk about iron and we see iron, we get, our labs done and we get our iron tested. we typically think of anemia, we don't have enough iron. And it's particularly prevalent in menstruating women. And then, of course, those who don't eat red meat. So what is really more of a problem, though, is iron overload, so if you have iron overload, iron can be oxidized, which is inflammatory, and it can create a really big problem. So it can be genetic. The best way to if you have a genetic potential toward, it's called hemochromatosis if you don't already know it, but if you have that genetic potential, then the best way to lower your iron is just to go and donate your blood. So do that, but understanding that it is really important to know your iron levels. And also there's in a cardiometabolic panel, there's a lab called GGT. GGT can also be important in understanding where your iron is, and if it's elevated, if it's oxidized and creating more of a problem, which could lead to cardiovascular risk factors. So it's iron and ferritin that are two of those. Ferritin being a acute phase reactant. It's acute phase reactant, which means if there are a number of these that are considered acute phase reactants. They can be higher, they can be lower. So for ferritin, if it's elevated, it's considered a problem, and you want to address it immediately. You want to understand why ferritin is elevated. Okay, so making sure you keep your levels in check. I got to take another break. We got to talk about our other sponsor, Zymogen. So Zymogen is a great company. I use them all the time. I don't use just one company because they all have all the professional lines that I use, because that's what I use. They're all professional. But they have things that I need for different clients because everybody's unique. We're all different, and so I go in and I pick and choose what I need. But Zymogen being one of those who they're amazing at what they do, because they won't put out products that aren't backed by science, that they haven't studied, and that has and if it comes off the line and there's anything wrong with it, they won't put it out there. And there it is, Zymogen. Thanks, Henry. So it is a amazing company. You cannot find them on Amazon and eBay. I tell you not to buy your supplements on Amazon or eBay because they're often not the right supplements, not the same thing, which can be seriously damaging. So great company. You can go to my website and click on the link and put in the code radio5 for a discount. And you can check out all the products they have. They have products for pretty much all parts of the body. So check them out. It's good stuff. I am a huge fan. Okay, so when it comes to diet and lifestyle, one of the things that we want to make sure, and we hit on this a little bit, but making sure that we're balancing our omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids. We have to have both. But in life, when we eat too much processed food, we're eating, cows and other animals that are not fully pastured, not 100% pastured. They're taken off and they're given things that are not good for them, so it increases their omega-6, which is going to increase our omega-6 when we eat them. So we have a lot of this chronic fire that's just constantly burning, this inflammation that creates really, really huge problems like cardiovascular disease, like heart attacks, like strokes, right? That we want to make sure that we're keeping our inflammation down. So we want to check our essential fatty acids. We always want to know where omega-3s and omega-6s are. And so you get those from fish, good healthy smaller fish, salmon, anchovies, artichokes, think smash. Salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring are your best sources. They're small, they don't hold on to a lot of the toxins like your big fish like tuna do. Staying away from the oils, stay away from canola oil, cottonseed oil, corn oil. Those are highly inflammatory. Make sure your D's in the right place. You also want to make sure that your K2 is super important for cardiovascular disease. You don't want to take vitamin D for a long period of time without taking it with K2, okay? So when I put people on vitamin D, I raise their levels quickly, and then I switch them over to an ADEK supplement, so all of the fat-soluble nutrients together, because they work in harmony together. Getting good sleep, getting good regular exercise, not pushing yourself too much, but not moving, not moving. So move, if you sit at a desk all day, get up, move around, do some jumping jacks, do some sit-ups, move the body. It's meant to move. okay? Magnesium, huge. So many of us are deficient in magnesium, and it's so important for multiple biochemical processes, but also for cardiovascular health. We have to have magnesium, and we're all very deficient. So knowing where that is, making sure you're getting it, and making sure you're getting the right form. There are multiple forms. You can do a citrate. It's going to help with the cardiovascular system, but it also is going to pull water into the bowels, and it'll loosen the stools up, which is a good thing too, because you get to a point where they're a little bit loose, you know you're at your point, so you're getting the amount that you need. So there are other forms, we don't need to get into that right now, but other forms do different things. Magnesium is super important. Be sure that you're getting enough of it. You know, I think we hit this enough. We talked about inflammation. So, but there are things like hyperinsulinemia. Say that 10 times, or even 2 times. So this is an excess of insulin in the blood triggered by diet high in carbohydrates. We don't need high carbohydrate diets. We're not meant to eat high carbohydrate diets. Now, some people need more carbs and some people need less. This all depends on genetics, right? So knowing your genetics and knowing what your body needs can be a big deal when it comes to knowing the food that you need. I'm a low protein, low fat, low carb. I eat protein, I eat fat, and I eat carbs. All my carbs mostly come from vegetables. My husband is high fat, high protein, lower carb, and so he still eats lots of vegetables though. We keep you know, the breads and the pastas to a minimum. I mostly do that. He's still a bread and pasta guy, but we try to keep him as healthy as we can, right? Okay. Let's see, we hit on that. I think we talked enough about vegetable oil, understanding that it is excessively atherogenic and toxic and inflammatory. Okay, so again, no canola oil. Please, no canola oil. If you have it in your house, throw it away. Don't use it up, just throw it away. Okay, very, very important to know. So, we're kind of at the end of our time. I want to reiterate that this is purely maybe to give you more questions to get answered, right? It's for your knowledge, it's for your information. You make your decisions, you be your own advocate. Read the books. Get this book, The Great Cholesterol Myth. It's an awesome, awesome book, okay? It's up to us to do the best we can for our bodies, and when we do the best we can for our bodies, it moves on to our families and onto our communities. We need to pay attention to that because we need healthy communities. I feel like we're slipping a little bit. I'm grateful to be a part of the functional medicine world as a functional nutritionist, and so we're really starting to push the awareness and the accountability, and then digging for answers instead of just covering up with a drug. And again, drugs sometimes are good, but not all the time. So it's always, almost always in our best interest to look at lifestyle factors first, or drugs for a short period of time. As you start to alter lifestyle factors, then hopefully you can wean yourself off, depending on what it is. Allopathic medicine is amazing for acute care. It is amazing for acute care. People live through heart attacks and strokes because of allopathic medicine and the drugs, and the amazing steps forward that we take when it comes to acute care. But then managing chronic conditions is a little bit of a different story. This is where functional medicine, functional nutrition shines. So again, if you ever have, even if there are topics that you want me to cover, post them in the Facebook page, because I would love to hear if you have questions, if there's a way that if there's something that I can do to help, then post them. My website's tastelifenutrition.com. It's Taste Life Nutrition on all the social media. We have the Supercharge Your Immune System Challenge coming up. That's going to be a lot of fun. So that's October 5th. And I'll be on the show with Dr. Lynn and Dr. Sam tomorrow at 2:30. And we'll be talking about the program some more there. So go to the link, sign up. Thank you for joining me. This is, again, a topic near and dear to my heart, and I think it's an important one to talk about as much as we can. So hope you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Thanks.